Holy fuck!
Oh my God! Oh my God! Jesus fucking Christ! Chris, are you...
That's scary.
It's been 18 years since this moment, and the truth of this horrific event remains hidden. The thousands of people that died that day and the millions since have yet to receive any justice. And this attack is still used to this day to justify endless war in the Middle East, killing more and more innocent people. This story, the official story of 9/11, their own version, is so full of holes, it isn't even funny. It does not stand up to scrutiny. It is garbage. No real investigator would accept this report as evidence of anything but gross incompetence. And that's at best. At best, our government dropped every ball and made every mistake that they possibly could, failing in every way imaginable. At worst, they, or at least key members, planned and pulled it off themselves. Now, I lean towards the latter. And I do so based on their own actions during and after the event. They behaved like guilty people at every turn. Gaffes about explosives, taking down buildings, shipping off all the steel to China so it couldn't be investigated. 3 steel frame buildings collapsed due to fire in one day. Never before or since has that happened. And you don't want to inspect the steel? You don't want to find out why? Too many officials, and Larry Silverstein himself, mentioned explosives being used. Now, I have many reasons why I believe that 9/11 was an inside job, and we'll go into more of them in a bit. But what I want to make sure we focus on is people are dying over this lie. Right now, and every day, wars are being waged based on this lie, all for money and power. And this was all pre-planned. We're being played like fools. When I say we, I'm not talking to those of you that would click on this kind of video. I'm sure that you're well aware that this is maybe the biggest lie ever sold to the American people. But we need more people to wake up to this painful truth. And it is the responsibility of the woke to wake the others. Now that means we need to do more to stop this killing that's going on over a lie. We need to inform people and make them aware of the truth. And I hear you. We've been trying for 18 years. We have screamed it at people, shouted it from the rooftops. What more can we do? Well, I don't think it's doing more, really. It's just doing it smarter. Work smarter, not harder. Take into account what we're fighting against. A lifetime of indoctrination and deception. A mass media that was weaponized in the 50s and spouts nothing but lies and propaganda. And our biggest obstacle, cognitive dissonance. People don't want to believe that our government or people in high power would kill innocent people, attack our own buildings, and lie us into endless war. They want to believe our leaders are good and have the best of intentions. And I get it. I want to believe that too. And they have also been trained not to think for themselves, to even be ashamed to consider a conspiracy theory. You know, only fools believe in those, right? Well, no. Conspiracies are real, and theories are real. You put them together, still real. It's just that the CIA weaponized the term conspiracy theorist after the JFK assassination in order to silence and discredit anyone speaking out against the official story. And it worked. Today, free thinkers are considered crazy loons. Logic is ignored in favor of fitting in with the crowd. And conspiracies are still sold to the people. Hell, the official story of 9/11 is a conspiracy. 19 terrorists, along with Osama bin Laden, conspired together to attack American buildings using airplanes as weapons. That's a conspiracy. That's what a conspiracy is. 20 people planning to do a thing. That's all a conspiracy is. A group of people planning to do something. And if you believe that the rich and powerful don't conspire to keep and grow that power and wealth, then I think that it is maybe you that is naive. But I really think that the whole stigma behind conspiracy theories is what makes good people turn a blind eye to this obvious farce. It's all that makes any sense to me because the official story of 9/11 just doesn't hold water at all. Let's break it down real quick. Like I said, 19 terrorists led by Osama bin Laden. Tim Osman is Osama bin Laden's CIA codename. He worked for us, but we'll get back to that later on. So these 20 guys hatched a plan in a cave in Afghanistan to come to America, learn to fly, and carry out their master plan. So 19 of them come here, and even though they can barely speak English, barely even write English, and they don't even fill out or complete their paperwork, they all get through and into the country with no real problems. All 19 of them. Then 4 of them enroll in flight schools. They don't go much or learn much of anything, but they enroll. The school that taught Hani Hanjour, for example, the terrorist who turned out to be the best pilot of them all, said that he couldn't even fly a small Cessna. Now, these devout Muslims on a religious jihad willing to die for their cause didn't worry much about following the laws of their faith while they were here. Maybe for devout Muslims on a suicide mission, the rules of Allah don't apply, but they drank, did drugs, and hung out at strip clubs while they prepared for their mission. They lived it up basically for the time that they were here, spending large amounts of cash and drawing tons of attention. But no one takes notice of them. Some of them are even living with undercover federal agents, but they still get their plane tickets and board their flights no problems on the morning of September 11th. They break up into 4 teams and successfully hijack 4 planes. Not one team fails to take the cockpit and control of their plane. Then they fly off course and with transponders switched off for nearly 2 hours, unassaulted by our military. The biggest and best military on the planet, mind you. And during this time, they hit 3 of 4 targets, World Trade Center 1 and 2, and the Pentagon. The most protected building in the world's most protected airspace is hit in this 2-hour time frame. 75% success rate for these 19 guys on the day so far. And that's just the beginning of the things that make no sense about the attacks on this day. Later on, it gets worse. World Trade Center 2 collapses to dust into its own footprint at near free fall speed. And minutes later, World Trade Center Building 1 pulls the exact same trick. Pretty good strike for 2 planes, right? Total annihilation of the structure with 2 precise hits. They couldn't have planned it any better. But their tremendous luck doesn't even end there. About 5 hours later, a 3rd skyscraper collapses in the same way, but it was hit with no plane and was a football field away from the towers that did fall. So these terrorists, according to the intelligence community and the official report, took down 3 steel frame buildings with 2 planes. This story, their story, the official story, makes no sense at all. And they can't even explain Building 7 in the official report, so they just leave it out. Then they sell the public a pancake collapse story for the other 2 buildings, and despite breaking every law of physics, the people accepted it. But most don't even realize that Building 7 even fell that day. Now, I've done many debates and interviews about 9/11 along the years, and it amazes me how many people that are convinced our government is telling the truth about 9/11 have never even heard of Building 7's collapse. Then when they're confronted with it, they can't explain it. I have never had anyone be able to explain it, nor have I seen a single expert explain away the collapse of Building 7 in any satisfactory way. Building 7 is key. It's a place to focus. We need to pick our spots and be intelligent in our fight to spread the truth and wake the others, so focusing on the collapse of Building 7 is good for many reasons. The collapse of Building 7 cannot be explained, and since they have to admit that it fell at free fall speed, explosives had to have been used. And if explosives were used in Building 7, they were used in all 3. Rigging a building for demolition is a long and involved process. It takes weeks. It can't be done in a day, during a fire. If Building 7 was taken down, as Larry Silverstein himself said,
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
The leaseholder himself says he and the fire department decided to pull it. Now, pull is a demo term, meaning to bring down a building with explosives. Now, if 7 was pulled, then it had to be rigged for demolition in advance. This fact shows premeditation, and it implies that the other 2 structures that fell in the same way in that same complex were also rigged to come down in advance. 7 is key. The Pentagon is another key that often gets overlooked. Now let's start with the pilot of the terrorist team that supposedly took this plane, Hani Hanjour. There was only one interview ever done with the flight instructor who taught Hanjour. Listen in his own words to what kind of a pilot Hani was before I tell you what they claim that he did.
Tonight we are also learning more about a September 11th hijacker from the man who taught him how to fly. Hani Hanjour is the terrorist who flew a hijacked plane into the Pentagon. He attended CRM flight school right here in Scottsdale. Today, Hanjour's instructor talked to KTAR Radio's Preston Westmoreland about his infamous student. Now, he wants to remain anonymous, so we are disguising his voice.
I was crying for about 2 weeks, and I couldn't sleep for, at least 4 or 5 weeks I couldn't sleep.
Hani Hanjour's instructor says he was devastated when he learned that this death and destruction was caused by one of his students.
I was almost suicidal at that point because I felt so responsible for even just knowing these people.
What kind of a student was Hani Hanjour? A slow learner who started concerning his flight instructor when he refused to land the plane or practice stalls and steep turns.
He would just refuse. He would start crying and he would, refuse to do it. He would beg with me, plead with me not to.
Hanjour's instructor says he even had to cancel several flights because his student was so emotional. And when he saw what Hanjour did, there was a feeling that a trust was violated.
That trust that we put in those people, so they can take their skills and spread them across the world in a good manner, had been totally violated in the most grotesque manner.
He would cry when asked to land, beg not to learn it. His instructor had to stop lessons because he was so emotional. Hani Hanjour took that training and pulled off a maneuver that experienced pilots can't pull off. He flew that Airbus like a fighter jet, doing a 330-degree descending corkscrew maneuver to hit the Pentagon in the side around the first floor. He flew a commercial airliner feet off the ground at over 500 miles per hour, hitting only 5 light poles before striking the Pentagon and disappearing. No footage exists of the strike either, aside from these 7 images. Did you see a plane? I saw a smoke trail and an explosion. No plane. Now, the FBI confiscated surveillance video from every camera in the area pointed at the Pentagon. Close to 150 different videos, and not one plane in any of that? Maybe that's because there was no plane. Maybe what hit the Pentagon is exactly what it looks like in the video they showed us. A missile. Look at the Pentagon right after the strike. The roof doesn't collapse for a while, and I don't know about you, but I see no hole big enough for a plane. I don't see where the wings went either. They didn't go in, so where'd they go? They're not on the lawn. There was no real evidence of a plane at any site, but the trade centers were demolished. That makes sense. But the Pentagon? And what about Flight 93? The hero story. No plane there either. Just gone into the earth. The coroner said he stopped being coroner as soon as he got there because there was nothing. They would have you believe a 757 entered the earth perfectly, and I guess can't even be retrieved because they never even tried. They say that the passengers overpowered the terrorists on this particular flight. They have made a few movies about it, and it's a very good story actually. I love a good hero tale, and God knows that this day needs one if any does, but I'm sorry. I have to call bullshit on Flight 93 as well. Flight 93 is a big key, hidden behind a hero story that protects it. It makes it untouchable. I mean, how dare you besmirch the heroes of the day? Say what you will about anything else, any other part, but those people gave their lives to save God knows how many people. How could you say that that didn't happen? Well, because it didn't. This is a picture of the crash site of Flight 93 from 1994. It's an abandoned strip mine. That scar in the earth, conveniently shaped like an airplane, was already there. So you see, aside from the impossibility of an airplane disappearing into the earth, the crash site was already there for 7 years before 9/11. So if there was no plane, where did it go? And more important, where did the passengers go? What happened to them? What about all the phone calls they made to their families? And those are all good questions. Now, the phone calls I believe were real, but I believe that they were placed from the ground. I believe all 4 of those flights were switched in flight and landed, replaced with a drone aircraft in its place to carry out a predetermined flight path. The passengers were then forced to make those calls, and then I believe they would have been lined up and shot. It's grim, I know, but think about the people who would do something like this and then ask yourself if it's outside the realm of possibilities. Something like this was proposed before. It was called Operation Northwoods, and it was pitched to President Kennedy as a way to start a war with Cuba. Planes would be used, commercial airliners, and switched in the air mid-flight with drones that could then be blown up and blamed on the Cubans. This plan made it to the president's desk. It had been signed off on by everyone up until JFK squashed it. Now let's talk a little bit about the Project for a New American Century.
Talk about the PNAC document.
So
being Project for New American Century.
The Project for the New American Century, which is a think tank that was around in the 90s and up through 2005 or 6, and then it disappeared, and then came back online in 2009 when the coast was clear, and clearly nobody was getting prosecuted for anything. And there are about 17 members of this so-called think tank who were in top positions in the Bush-Cheney administration, advisor to the president, to the vice president, assistant secretary of defense, and so forth. And a couple of these guys, Feith and Wolfowitz, had earlier worked for Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel and put out a paper that advocated the same kind of program that they then put out papers from PNAC advocating, that is intense nationalism and militarism and going after Middle Eastern states with aggressive wars. And this is what PNAC urged on President Bill Clinton, who agreed with them and made regime change in Iraq one of his goals.
And I think this is very significant, that this PNAC document, although it was mostly Republicans, I believe Lieberman was a supporter of it, if not a signer of it. But Clinton agreed with one of its main propositions, that there are certainly sections of the Democratic Party that are on board with this vision.
Right, and there are several key papers that they published, and the biggest one maybe was in 2000 called Rebuilding America's Defenses, as if they needed to somehow be rebuilt, which was advocating a much larger military, the ability to fight multiple simultaneous wars, an aggressive agenda of going after nations in key regions of American interest, including resource regions, the need to plunder other people's resources. And a lot of it is language about absolute dominance and maintaining control of the world and fending off any possible rival. This is in the shadows of the Cold War having ended and the need existing for some new enemy, and they haven't quite come up with international terrorism or Al-Qaeda yet to fill that gap, but they want to take this opportunity to maintain American dominance.
And get rid of regimes that have gone like this. So you can't have any that have left the U.S. sphere of influence. So Saddam in Iraq, but you also then have Iran, and it's a series of Syria. And so you have to either be in our sphere of influence or you're not going to be.
Right, and you look at what Wesley Clark said about the list of nations that Donald Rumsfeld had, 7 nations we were going to go into in 5 years if the Iraqi people hadn't fought back.
Now that was a detailed account of what PNAC is. Now let's look at an excerpt from the document that he mentioned, Rebuilding America's Defenses. From the document, in their own words, it says that this change is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event, like a new Pearl Harbor. Months after the release of that document, we had this happen. And right after that, this started and hasn't stopped since. Coincidence? Well, any good detective worth his salt will tell you that there is no such thing. In that clip that I played, they mentioned General Wesley Clark and a plan for 7 wars. Let's look at what General Clark actually had to say in an interview about this with Democracy Now!
To worry about Iraq, not Iran. I knew why, because I'd been through the Pentagon right after 9/11. About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." I said, "Is it classified?" He said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Well, don't show it to me." And I saw him a year or so ago, and I said, "You remember that?" He said, "Sir, I didn't show you that memo. I didn't show it to you."
So as you can see, this was all pre-planned. They needed a new Pearl Harbor-like event to get support for the wars in the Middle East, and I believe that they made it happen. It's just too many coincidences. Way too many. 1 or 2 I could accept. 3 or 4 even, but not this many. This report, their official account of the event, is unacceptable. It is an insult to the victims and the casualties ever since. We need a real, impartial investigation into 9/11. We will never get one unless we wake more people to this lie. We're going to have to reevaluate how we go about doing that. And I think we should focus on these 3 keys: Building 7, the Pentagon strike, and the Shanksville crash site. Building 7 cannot be explained, and if it was brought down, so were all 3. The Pentagon is an extravagant story of incredible luck that just doesn't stand up on its own at all. The only video ever released shows no plane or anything that even might have been a plane, and before the roof fell, there was insufficient damage from a plane as well, and hardly any debris left behind. But Shanksville, Flight 93, is the golden key, and that's why they hid it behind a hero story. My wife told me to leave that part out of the video, not to include it, not because she thinks I'm wrong about the passenger's true fate that day, but because she thinks I'm right. And I see her point. It's an awful thought. But there is no plane in Shanksville. It didn't disappear into the earth, and if it did happen to hit an abandoned strip mine by luck and enter the earth perfectly, they could still have retrieved it. They made no effort to, because no plane was there at all. They covered it neatly with a hero story blanket to protect it, and the truth is underneath screaming to be heard. Expose it. Push these points, and be easy. Often, we try to shake people awake. That doesn't work. It just triggers their cognitive dissonance, and their brain goes into self-defense mode. So just plant seeds. Spread the truth. Share videos like this one, and get things like this out there in front of people. That's all we can really do. We can lead the sheep to the truth, but they won't embrace it until they're ready. So hard as it may be, I think we need to be more patient and understanding when we try to wake the sleeping. So thanks for watching this video, and share please. We need to bring justice to all the victims of the horrific attacks of 9/11 and the millions that have died ever since over this massive lie in these never-ending wars. And nothing will stop it but the truth. So stay out there and keep the truth alive so that it can thrive. Be the media and fight the lies. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time right here from Me on Things and Stuff.